Hello, everyone, and a very, very warm welcome back in the midst of this heat wave. Welcome back to the Women's Football Show with me, your host, Lily Saunders, and I am very pleased to be joined today by Sam Biccarino, commercial analyst by day, but also fantastic football analyst, writer at WSL Football, and of course, creator of the brilliant podcast Decoding the WSL, offering many a football statistic for all things WSL and WSL teams. So welcome, Sam. Thank you very, very much for being on the podcast with us today.
Thank you very much for having me on. And yeah, well, I was going to say the warm welcome as well, but it's an absolute roasting welcome at the moment.
It is, and we wouldn't be British if we weren't talking about the weather, would we? So without further ado, let's talk about Leicester's season as a whole. Obviously, we haven't been on the podcast since Leicester unfortunately lost that playoff against Charlton. That in itself was a very, very hot day, and I think that contributed to a bit of a flat game. I don't think it really got going until the extra time. Did you have a chance to watch that, Sam, or did you catch the penalty shootout at least?
It was a real cagey game, wasn't it? You could tell that neither team wanted to lose. I think both teams had a really good keeper, and their keeper is probably one of their better players for both teams. So maybe both teams are thinking, if we end up getting it to penalties, maybe not the worst thing in the world. But yeah, it was for Leicester because Sophie Whitehouse was unreal.
She was, and I just got that niggling feeling in the back of my head as it creeped closer and closer towards 120 minutes that would be the end result. She's had a phenomenal season, and there was no kind of taking her off that pedestal, I don't think. And Leicester didn't exactly try to fox her, as in they put the ball in the bottom right-hand corner about 4 times, apart from Olivia McLaughlin. So I guess penalty shootout training will be in the running for next season or pre-season at least. But yeah, a bit of not a bit, a very, very disappointing end to a pretty disappointing season, would you say, Sam?
Yeah, it wasn't a good. I mean, it didn't obviously start in the most sort of strong position, sacking Amadine Mikel in pre-season. I think there were rumours that it was going to be because Matt Beard was hoping to be the manager, or Leicester were hoping Matt Beard was going to be the manager that replaced. Obviously, that wasn't what happened. Rick Passmore came in, interim, ended up being permanent. And yeah, you just didn't. They didn't really ever seem to get the players going. I thought this might be the sort of kind of like a solid foundation of a manager to not necessarily, get Leicester into the top half, but at least to avoid relegation. But yeah, it was a slightly below average first half of the season, and yeah, really poor second half of the season with 11 losses to end the league campaign. It's never going to work well for anyone's book. And then obviously the end of or the last game of the season as well, the playoff just didn't really spark joy into anything. I mean, it was a clean sheet, I guess, for one way. So there's as much of a positive, I think, as I can put on it.
Yeah, no conceding a last-minute goal for Leicester, as they have been guilty of, I think, in the second half of the season. We dissected it a bit as well. We had Willie Kirk on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, and I think it was that loss of leadership in the January transfer window. We lost Janice Cayman, and then we lost Celeste Boré to an ACL. And I think that kind of instability at the back ultimately is what cost us, and what I don't know. There also seemed to be a lack of creativity at the front. I mean, we've had Olivia McLaughlin, but Willie Kirk was saying that we should have maybe strengthened in the midfield instead of up front with. I mean, Rachel Williams is a very, very experienced and highly qualified striker, but do you think perhaps Leicester missed out in that sense, and that they made maybe some poor signing decisions, minus Ashley Neville?
Yeah, it was weird because especially in January, when the signings start going through, they sort of seemed like sensible decisions to sign.
Yes.
Again, not to get you into the top half, but just to stop you being relegated. People like Ash Neville, Sarah Mailing, obviously Rachel Williams up front. You just sort of would bank on the fact that they are going to do a solid job. They're not going to light the world up. They're not going to go and beat Chelsea 5-0, but they are going to get results against West Ham, Liverpool, those kind of teams, or at least can get a draw, can get a goal, those kind of things. But yeah, there was just something that just didn't quite click. I think the midfield point is in terms of strengthening the midfield, I wouldn't necessarily say in like the quality of players. I think Sam Biccarino played well. I think Living McLaughlin, I went to see I think it was the West Ham game. I thought, although obviously Leicester lost the game, I thought she personally looked really good in that game and looked like a really neat player. But I think in terms of strengthening the midfield, we could have used an extra player in there. So not necessarily a different one, but just an extra player, because when you're already getting overrun quite a lot, actually trying to get the ball out wide to people like Lehman and Kane, wasn't necessarily the best tactic in the end. I think there was a little bit of counter-attacking that did well. Shannon O'Brien ended up being the top goal scorer because of that kind of tenacity that she can bring. But yeah, I think if the midfield was a bit stronger, then and with more people, maybe that, in hindsight, would have been the best way to go. But yeah, by the time January ended, I was sat there thinking that Leicester have had a pretty decent window. So, hindsight is 2020.
Yeah, I agree. And sometimes I think Emily Van Egmond is an interesting player, because I think she played that kind of deeper role, dropping deep and trying to help play out from there. But I don't think Rick Passmore kind of decided what he wanted to do with, I guess, the midfield, or as in he didn't want to change what he was doing. So that I think that would be my point of contention for Leicester's season in general. But the broader WSL season as a whole, I mean, we've finally had a different winner to Chelsea, which was good fun. What did you make of Man City's season?
Yeah, Man City were, I think, going forwards, just fantastic. Defensively, they were a decent side. They were sort of a top 3-4. I think the top 3 or 4 were all quite close together in defensive metrics. But in terms of going forward, they were just a cut above everyone else. Even when you've got someone like, Bunny Shaw, one of the things that I've brought up a few times is the fact that she actually, compared to her XG, she was pretty much spot on. She didn't overachieve, but she just had so much of it. The team were creating so many chances for her. She was creating so many chances for herself, getting good shots away in good positions at the right times. And that, at the end of the day, is kind of what got them over the line. They do normally say that attack will win you games and defense will win you titles, but when you're scoring as many goals as City did and as many more goals than anyone else, it's crazy. Because I think Bunny Shaw scored almost double the number of Leicester's goals just on her own. So yeah, not sorry to bring it back to Leicester again when we're trying to move on from it, but they were just phenomenal, and they've got so much attacking talent as well. Because obviously Bunny Shaw is like the headline grabber, but they had Lauren Hemp, who also stayed fit all season, which her and Shaw didn't last season. Kasparai was fantastic, even though she was right back going forward. They've got Carolyn. They've added Beth Mead to an already phenomenal attack as well. Viv Miedemar's in there. Grace Clinton often plays in that 10. Iman Bene didn't get many minutes. She looked fantastic at the Euros, and she looked great when she did play for City. They've just got so much talent in those forward positions. So yeah, perhaps it's unsurprising that when you've got a squad that talented at those kind of things, that I think Jägerlitz did absolutely the right thing. And rather than focusing on the defense, which was still pretty good, he really focused on the attack and really got them going.
Yeah, I agree. And the reason I asked you is to kind of, if you compare that to Leicester, and like you say, Bunny Shaw's goal count, almost double Leicester's total by the end of the season, is it's that shot creation, it's that creation of chances. I think that's what really hindered Leicester, is they couldn't create. I think they had the fewest shots of all teams, on like 157, I think. So if anyone watching currently wants to check out Sam's excellent thread on X of all things WSL statistics, this is where I'm getting all my information from. But that's ultimately what cost Leicester, isn't it? Because they couldn't create, so they couldn't score goals.
Yeah, and they, as well as having the fewest shots in the league, they also had the worst shot conversion. So if you're taking the fewest number of shots and you're not very good at scoring them, it's perhaps no wonder that they got, I think it was 11 goals in 22 games, which it's just quite poor. Whereas obviously City are like the other end of that scale. I think that I'm interested to see what City do next season, because I think squads quality wise, they're probably actually similar to the season before, but they just didn't have the injuries, because Bunny Shaw missed half a season, Lauren Hemp missed even more. This season, their top players stayed fit throughout. That made a real big difference. Next season, obviously, there's a few more WSL games. They've got Champions League games to contend with. They won't be happy with just sort of putting out a second string side there. So they're going to need to get a few more players in. They've obviously got Beth Mead. I don't think they've announced it yet, but I think pretty much everyone is expecting them to announce Niamh Charles any day. And there's a little bit of who else might they bring in, because they do still need, I think if they want to challenge for the title again and do well in the Champions League, they do still need a bit more depth. They don't necessarily need new players for their first 11, but they need new players to rotate through.
Yeah, absolutely. And on the other end of the spectrum, we have Leicester City, who now play in the WSL 2. So sad to say. It is so sad to say. Having been promoted in 2022, they're now back down. And going back to the shots, I think Hannah Kane had the highest amount of shots without scoring with 24. But Leicester were, interestingly, the highest for attacks down the right-hand side, which is where Hannah Kane played. So she wasn't scoring and they kept attacking down the right-hand side. I think perhaps a switch up could have been made there. And it's all kind of all well and good looking back. But I do wonder if the team at the Leicester analysis kind of, they had a look at that and decided it's not working, so maybe we should try something else. But who knows? Obviously, Hannah Kane has now departed the club. Let's talk a bit about goalkeeping, because interestingly, I think Leicester are up there in terms of saves made. Talk a bit about defence as well. I'd like to highlight Ash Neville. Your stats came up with her being the highest, committed the highest number of tackles per 90, as well as the highest number of tackles this season, and second highest for ground duels won. So she was a good signing for Leicester, wasn't she?
Yeah, I think she was absolutely the kind of signing Leicester needed as well. That was just the sort of solid, not going to do anything too fancy. But I mean, since I've started doing sort of media stuff and posting stats, she's always up there when she was at Spurs of like the defensive metrics. And it was, I guess, those kind of things that were the reason that Leicester thought this is the kind of player we need in, because when you're losing some defenders and maybe you need to sort of tighten up at the back a bit, like Ash Neville is absolutely the sort of player. And to be fair, Sarah Mailing too, she's not quite as defensively solid, a bit better going forward, but they're the sort of signings that it makes sense to make. So yeah, again, it was one of those at the end of January, I'm like, these are good signings. These are good, sensible signings for Leicester. In hindsight, obviously, it didn't quite work out. But goalkeeping wise, I think it's been really interesting, because obviously, I used to say that Leicester had two keepers that should be playing in the top half in Lisa Kopp and Nina Leitzig. Obviously, Lisa Kopp did end up moving on. Nina Leitzig stayed, brought in Liv Clark, who I think has actually seen her play for Wales and things as well, and at Bristol City previously, and I thought she was a really good signing. And then kind of out of nowhere, Katie Keane has come through, and albeit she's had a bit of a baptism of fire and it's not necessarily the easiest start for her, I thought she did well. And it's the sort of thing that I don't know exactly what's going to happen with keepers, but if she ended up being the first team keeper next season, I don't think Leicester would be in a bad position. I think they'd be happy with that. Although I don't think you'd hang on to her for too long if she continues on the same trajectory. By the time she's in her mid-20s at the latest, she's surely going to be playing at WSL level. But yeah, the keeper situation is really strong at Leicester, and there's always has been sort of really good, not just shot stoppers, but communicators as well, which I think is really important. I know as someone obviously at an amateur level, but has played as a defender, the difference it makes when you've got someone behind you talking, telling you where to be, what to do, etc. It doesn't go down on the stats. It doesn't go down as on the numbers, the sort of things that I talk about. But with the eye test and with that sort of, you can't touch the fact that someone's talking to you and sort of getting you in the right position. But it does make a difference, to the players, but then to the whole team as a unit.
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember watching the relegation playoff, and you really could hear Katie Keane sort of barking orders, and she'd only been there for a couple of games, and it is so important to have someone like that leading from the back. And I almost wonder if we'd had more communicators and more kind of leaders at the back, whether Leicester could have turned their season around. I mean, for all that she's great, our centre back, Sari Case, I mean, sometimes she seems a little bit absent, and same with the other two, Thibaut I never hear them, I feel like, when I watch the games. And I think you're right, communication is really important. And I've been really impressed with Olivia Clark. She was unfortunate to pick up the injury, but same with Katie Keane. I think same as Sophie Whitehouse. I wonder how long Charlton will be able to hang on to her before the big clubs come sniffing, because she had a phenomenal season. And I think she had gone under the radar a little bit until that fantastic penalty shootout performance from her. So yeah, I think Leicester were unlucky in the sense that they had really, really good goalkeepers, but perhaps not the team to kind of stop the shots from coming. Let's talk a bit about you, Sam. Let's see. I'd love to know what got you so interested in data analysis, and kind of how the whole decoding the WSL started.
Well, data side has been something that I've done for a while, basically since leaving uni. I've done a couple of different sort of analytics type roles. I've not necessarily worked in one sector. I used to work in automotive. I now work in finance, doing a lot of marketing stuff as well. But it's always been like analytics is very much what I do. But I would really like to work in sport. It's obviously a really hard industry to get into. Already had like 9 to 5 job on the side, or not on the side, but could do something on the side of the 9 to 5 job. So yeah, I decided a few years ago to start trying to do something on social media. I'd started posting. Actually, didn't start specifically as women's football. I basically started posting about different sports that I like. So did men's football, women's football, Formula One, tennis, and the thing that really stuck, the thing that really seemed to resonate with people was the women's football. I think with some of the other areas, there's loads of people that do men's football stats. There's loads of people that do F1. There's loads of people that do tennis. Women's football, there wasn't really anyone doing it on a sort of regular stage in that sense. So yeah, I decided, you know what, let's try and not just generally throw some stats out there and see if people like it, but let's try and make something out of it. About a year later, I'd started Decoding the WSL, which is my podcast, which is all our sort of strap line is the stats and facts in the WSL. It's all very like numbers and analytics based. We do a bit around like, you know, transfer rumors and tactical things. And we talk a lot about fantasy as well. But the core of it is about the numbers. It's about the analytics. It's about sort of showing that it's not just basically women's football isn't just the stories. It's actually the fact that the players are quite good at football as well, and showing who's best and why, and discussing that kind of stuff. So yeah, I started out on my own almost 2 years ago now, and then over the first season got sort of a small group which has ended up sticking. So it's myself, Tom Marr, who's a journalist, Jacob Bernstein, similar to me, sort of does things on the side as a he's specifically focused a lot on Spurs, and then Izzy Duddy, who's been working for Even Sports, who ran Aerial Fantasy, and then has done sort of a few other bits in and around women's football. So yeah, we've got sort of that core, and then we've got another, I think, 8 or so that are sort of semi-regulars on the pod of influencers and commentators and journalists and those sort of people. So yeah, it's a nice group at the moment now. I think like we've got it to space in the space of 2 years, got it somewhere that I wasn't really expecting it to get to, which is great. And yeah, look forward to seeing where it ends up going from there.
No, I've been a fan. I've really enjoyed your episodes, and it's nice to have that different side of I guess general women's football talk, which focuses a lot more on individual players, and it's nice to know the kind of numbers behind the game. So yeah, credit to you. It's a fantastic project, and I'm very excited to see where it goes. I was wondering if you had a favorite women's football statistic from this season. Are there any that spring to mind that you thought, wow, that's quite interesting? I know I've put you on the spot, so
that's a real put me on the spot.
Yeah.
I know my favorite one that I've had, I won't give you one from this season, but the one when people ask me what's the favorite stat, it's when Viv Miedema was at Arsenal, she scored more league goals for Arsenal than the opponents did while she was on the pitch. So she literally outscored the opposition while she was playing for Arsenal on her own. Yeah, that's probably my favorite one. I can't think of one off the top of my head. I feel like I should do. It's like the season finished like however many weeks ago, and my brain's just gone, nope, summertime.
No, everything's left. You're focusing on I guess it was the season, then it was the World Sevens. What are your opinions on the World Sevens, actually? That's a good.
It's not for me personally, but I think it's good for the game. I know Jacob Pod, he went to, I think he went all 3 days actually, and he really liked it. He said it was fantastic. The atmosphere was really good. From everything I saw, all the players in the teams got really into it. It was a decent level of football there as well. And I think it's just generally quite good for the women's game. It's one of those things as well that I think it's really, from people from the outside that aren't necessarily that into women's football and don't sort of know the ins and outs of it, will just assume that, well, women's football one day will basically just keep copying men's football and it will grow and grow and it will get closer to the size of men's football. Whereas it doesn't need to be the exact same. And actually, there will be things that are different. And actually, the audience that likes women's football, not necessarily me personally, but generally speaking, are much more likely to like something like World Sevens. I don't know if it's something that's going to be that sustainable. I don't know if it's still going to be here in 20 years' time. But at the moment, it's fun. The players get to show their personalities. Fans get to watch it. And I don't know about you, but on social media, I don't think I've actually seen any of the football. I've just seen those of like the walkouts and stuff. Which, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of money on offer for it at the end of it. But you can tell the main thing that it was for was getting that content, getting people aware of it, getting people talking. And getting to like know the players. I know one of the things that people have said before about doing fantasy stuff and why that's so important is because people know about like the Lionesses generally. They'll know some of the Arsenal players, Chelsea players. If you're like a relatively casual women's football fan, but you won't know Hannah Kane necessarily. You won't know that Shannon O'Brien is Leicester's top goal scorer. You won't know who Sari Keys is. Whereas actually by playing fantasy, you get to know those other players as well. And I think World Sevens is really important for that. I think the casual football fan, probably women's football fan, didn't know who Hannah Blundell was or might have a rough idea. But then because of the stuff she did, with the like coming out the coffin things with the Man United shirt and taking it off, that was all really fun and funny. And then people end up, you just end up finding out a little bit about her. That's just one example. But I think because of stuff like that, it's really good for the game. It's not good for, it's not something that every person's going to enjoy. It's not necessarily for me, but I think it's good to have.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right in saying that we shouldn't treat it like the men's game. I think that goes for all women's sport. I've seen women's basketball over in the States. They do a summer league, but they call it Unrivaled, and I think it's like a 3x3 competition, and they've got more coming out. And I think, the blueprint is not the men's game in any sense of the word. So I enjoy the World Sevens content, and I think that's where their marketing team has decided that that's how we get our investors to invest, and that's how we grow the game. Not necessarily the actual 7-a-side football, but I suppose that's entertaining as well because you get more goals. And it was certainly a way for Leicester to finally win a game this side of the Christmas break.
I did hear on. I listened to Why Always She as well, another Leicester podcast that is sort of 2 Leicester women's fans that do it, and they mentioned about I think they were trying to cling on to the fact that Leicester didn't end the season on a loss, that they actually beat London City Lionesses in that. And I'm not sure. I don't know if I can count that as a competitive game, but
I will count it. I will take any positive end to this season. I'll grasp it with 2 hands. But yeah, I mean, where do Leicester go from here? That's my final question to you, Sam. Do they stick with Rick? Do they go with another manager? Do they beg for Amandine Mikel to return? What do you think in regards to the kind of head coaching role?
Yeah, I feel like Amandine Mikel's probably not going to return. I want to say she's managing is she in Mexico now? Something like that.
I think so.
She's cross pond. So I don't think she's going to be coming back anytime soon. Probably much to the annoyance of Naomi Mouchon. I was really excited when she came to Leicester. I remember watching her I think it was against West Ham in Australia, and thinking that she looked like had a really similar play style to Myra Ramirez, who had just had a fantastic season at Chelsea. And I was like, she's going to be really good for Leicester this season if she gets the minutes. And then she had a really bad injury, and then the following season, Mikel's not there. She doesn't get played for reasons I'm still not completely sure of. So yeah,
you and me both, Sam. You and me both.
I think for a start,
yelling,
give her some minutes, because she looks really bright and positive when she comes on. Not that Shannon O'Brien doesn't, but I think you can play them both, to be honest. In terms of what else Leicester need to do going forward, I think there's obviously, a wider club thing, because Leicester as a club, on the men's side, how many troubles they've had there. And often when something goes wrong on the men's side at a club, it often ends up going wrong on the women's side as well, especially, if you've got a linked club, which we don't like to see, but it is something that happens. You can kind of understand it. And it's no fault of the women's team, because, they've not had a hand in what's happened on the men's side, but they are going to feel the ramifications of it to some extent. I'd like to see Leicester. I'd personally like to see them back in the WSL. They are my they're not. I don't support Leicester necessarily, but they are my local WSL team, or were. And I think actually across WSL2, they are still my most local teams. I'd like to see them up, because then I can, go watch WSL games there. But that's probably a bit too selfish. But I'd like to see, I'd like to see them up. But I think realistically, just staying in the top half this season will probably be good, because they are a team that's really, I guess, on a negative trajectory at the moment. They're really going down, which isn't where they're going to want to be. It's going to depend what players they can keep in. It's going to depend who is managing them, because I don't personally think Rick Passmore did that good a job. I think there was problems going on where, with the formation, with the players that were in certain positions, where they were doing the wrong kind of tactics, and just not getting the results. And that's why they ended up on 11 losses in a row. I don't think you necessarily had world beaters in the side, but I think given the players you had, probably should have done better than you did. I'm not saying I would have done a better job, because like I've already said, I thought at the end of January, Leicester were probably going to be safe. I thought West Ham were going to be the team that went down, but I was wrong. But yeah, but then it's also a case of how do you replace Rick Passmore, because you can't just say, oh, well, we want a better manager, so therefore we're going to get one, because that's not always how it happens. You can't always just say, we want better players, so therefore we're going to get them, because do you have the funding for them? Do players actually want to come? Can you get the right kind of players in? I think realistically, you're probably going to be looking in 2 or 3 seasons' time to get promoted again as a sort of like a best realistic case scenario. Because in that point, you can get some young players in, thinking like Olivia McLaughlin. If you can keep a hold of her, if you can get sort of similar level players at similar age, that's going to be the time where they can then develop into a team together and basically try and be like Charlton or Birmingham were a year or 2 ago, and try and go from there. Because I think Charlton especially haven't put loads of money into the team. I don't know exactly, but I'd assume that compared to Birmingham and Palace, the teams that got promoted, I'd assume Charlton probably had the lowest wage bill. But they've got sort of players that have played together a decent amount. They've got good young players that have improved since they've been there. And I'd say that's probably the blueprint for Leicester to go to, because I don't think the facilities look too bad. We see them a lot on social media. They look all right. If that you can find a better manager, I think that's worth doing. But if not, see what Rick Passmore can do, and then try and retain the players that you can for it. I think there will be some that will go. We obviously know Hannah Kane's already gone, and there will be more, but try and get a good fee for them and try and get some money back into the club where you can, and then invest it wisely.
Absolutely. I think it will be difficult to hold on to Olivia McLaughlin, especially if she wants to get into the senior Lionesses side. She'll have to be playing first team WSL football. And I guess I suppose though in the past seasons, playing in the WSL2 was perhaps less attractive, but now with the automatic promotion of the top 2 teams, and whether that third place playoff continues to happen, I'm not entirely sure. But I suppose that does give a little bit more incentive. Say, oh, well, Leicester are a good side. We probably could finish top 2. So I can do 1 season in the WSL2, and then I'll be back in the WSL. I want to commit to that kind of project. Like as a player and as a manager, I think that is a little bit more attractive.
Yeah, I think it's 1 automatic up and then 1 playoff.
1 automatic, okay.
With the what will now be 13th place in the WSL.
Got you.
I think that's
still better than it was.
Yeah, and I think because the WSL is now a slightly bigger league, you can now do that. They just needed to do 1 where they put more people up, so there's still an even number basically. Because obviously, like last season when the WSL2 had a team less, it was a bit of a pain to have 1 team not playing every week. But yeah, I think the WSL2 is a much more attractive place to go and play than it was, because, well, partly because the women's game is growing generally. You think 5 years ago there were I don't know exactly, but I'd say 5 years ago there were probably players in the WSL that might not have been professional. Definitely were most of the teams, if not all of the teams in WSL2, whereas that's not the case now, which I think is a really good step forward, and hopefully that continues. And some of the teams that are still down there, you think of, obviously Leicester are one of them, but you've also got teams like Forest, like Newcastle, Wolves are coming up as well, look like they're sort of coming up with a purpose. There's good teams. There's a lot of team in the Midlands as well, so you're not going to have that far to go a lot of the time. But teams that are gonna be investing a bit, and actually they're not just there because they happen to have some women's players that are quite good. They're there because they want to get their women's team up into the WSL. They know how good it is for the club to be there. Whether that comes from sort of with my commercial hat on, getting into my actual 9 to 5 work mode, whether that comes from a point of it's really good for our branding, and to show that we're supporting the women's team. Because I think there's a case to say that even if a team, let's take Newcastle, for example, they're a Premier League side, and their women's team is in WSL2, if their men's fans can see that they're supporting the women's team, that only looks good. And actually the fact that they're giving, I don't know, £2 million, let's say, goes towards the women's team with nothing expected back, actually they might end up recouping that from the sort of goodwill of people that would then want to invest more in Newcastle as the men's team. So as a club as a whole, I think it's good. But just as taking that 9 to 5 hat off, and just from a football fan perspective, I think Newcastle fans that are really passionate about their club, both men's and women's, will like to see the fact that the women's team are getting up into the WSL. And that'll be the same at Leicester, and that'll be the same at Forest and any of the other teams down there, basically, other than Durham, who I think might be the only ones around that sort of size that aren't attached to a men's club. But yeah, I'm hoping to see that Leicester can invest a bit. I think it's going to be difficult given the situation the men's team are in, and obviously that makes it club wide. But from a personal point of view, if nothing else, I'd like to see Leicester go back up. And I think if they're smart, they can do it within the next 2 or 3 years, like in a realistic way.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I have no doubt that the fans will get them there. If there's anything that I've noticed this season, it's very, very loyal Foxes fans. Very outspoken, but nonetheless very loyal. Because I guess in women's football, you've got a couple fans that have a few teams that they support, which is another discussion in and of itself. But yeah, well, we definitely have the fan support on our side, and hopefully that translates onto the pitch. I'll leave it there then for this episode. Thank you very, very much, Sam. It has been a pleasure having you on, and having your fantastic analytical insight. Do go check out Sam's thread on X. It's very, very interesting. Try not to cry at the Foxes stats, but hopefully they look a bit better if Sam does a WSL 2-1 next year. Again, thank you very much, Sam.
No, thank you very much for having me. It's been really good.
Bro. And I'm not sure when the next episode will be, everyone, but we shall keep you posted on all the social medias. And as ever, if you would like to subscribe for the price of a pint, head on over to www.forfoxsake.news and you'll get all your Leicester City updates over there. Thanks very much. Brill!